Right, well thank you very much for keeping the time, and we'll try and do so through the afternoon. We've got a range of speakers again, and the first presentation is on Shisha Research. Janet Bradley, who's from Birmingham City Council, instigated a piece of research, and both Simon and Gam have undertaken that research as students at Birmingham University. So I'm going to hand over to Janet to start off.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you very much for allowing us to share this research with you that we've undertaken this year. As you can see from the title, we undertook two pieces of research: infection control and indoor air quality within Shisha premises within Birmingham. And this was a collaboration between the City Council, University of Birmingham and Public Health England. Birmingham has experienced a number of challenges with Shisha over the last about 7 years. We first knew about Shisha in about 3 days after the smoking ban came in, and which is quite ironic. And we've got probably between 19 and 21 Shisha premises. The whole thing started about a year ago when Zena from the University of Birmingham sent out an email to everybody, to local authorities, asking for any local authorities to help with students' dissertations. And I just saw it as an opportunity to undertake some research that my colleague Louise Elliott and myself have thought about for a considerable number of years through going into these Shisha premises. The aims of the research, the first one in terms of infection control, was to determine whether Shisha pipes represented a serious public health risk through transmission of bacterial or viral infections. And that was because when we went into a number of Shisha premises, obviously the practice there is to smoke, but what people do is they smoke it in a communal environment. They have a pipe in the middle of them and they pass it around each other. Obviously, to smoke something, you have to put it in your mouth, and whatever's in your mouth, our theory is you're going to pass it on to the next person, who will pass it on to the next person. We obviously didn't see much in terms of infection control procedures within these premises, but the research and the evidence to prove this wasn't there. So, which is one reason why we wanted to take this research forward. Another part of Simon's work was to investigate whether the hygiene standards could improve to reduce any risks that we found. Gam's research was about indoor air quality, and this was to measure the exposure levels of carbon monoxide and PM2.5 particulates inside premises. Again, I'll show you a photograph in a minute which shows how we actually thought that this was a problem. But what we were also getting anecdotal evidence from Shisha users when we first started going in is that people undertaking the practice were actually fainting or becoming quite dizzy, and acting as though they were quite drunk, even though there was no alcohol there. And our thought was, I think this is high levels of carbon monoxide, probably being smoked, but also possibly within the premises. During that time, we used to wear carbon monoxide level meters on ourselves when we went to inspections, and we did find that at the end of the night, we'd been to a couple of Shisha premises, that the carbon monoxide level was actually higher than what you would have expected. And so this led to us thinking we want to research this further. GAM also identified any standards of compliance of premises regarding the smoke-free legislation, health and safety legislation, and also compare carbon monoxide and particulate level guidance with WHO, HSE and the USEPH standards as well. So this just gives you an idea of what we find. The picture on the right, or left, is not a poor quality picture. That is taken, and obviously the poor quality comes from the amount of particulates in that premises at any one time from the smoke. I'm coming to the realisation that even if the premises comply with the 50% rule, the more Shisha smoking that you have, you will still have this problem. And this is one reason why I wanted to go down this research, and I'll talk about that later, what we're going to do with this research. On the other side is very typical of the kind of situation that we find of how the pipes are cleaned. That's obviously using a shower, and it's not going to take a lot of us to realise that that's very inadequate. So the hypotheses were found, and I'm going to hand over to Simon, who's going to talk through the first part of the research, which is the infection control. Oh, sorry, my fault was. Who was involved? We had the MSc students and ourselves. We also had public health from the local authority. They provided technical support. They also initially provided funding for the sampling. So obviously, if you're going to do sampling, it's going to cost money, and there's obviously not much of it around. And they did provide some resource from money in terms of allowing us to undertake sampling. And Public Health England have been exceptionally helpful to us in interpreting a lot of the data, especially around Simon's data, and also helping us further in how to interpret the data. Birmingham University, from the air pollution, have also been incredibly helpful to GAM in terms of interpreting the data as well. So now I will pass over to Simon.
Thank you, Janet. So I looked at the infection control implications of shisha pipes. As Janet said, surprisingly, after the smoke-free legislation, there was a boom of shisha premises. And this is kind of seen globally, it's not just a UK thing. However, nationally, we did see a 210% increase in the number of shisha premises from 2007 to 2012. Now, just a little background about shisha. It is a very much a cultural practice. You'll have several people smoking a single pipe. And they have, you can see at the top there, resting on the top, is a single mouthpiece which is shared by each individual. What a lot of bars do is provide these disposable plastic tips that go into the end of the mouthpiece, and the idea being that everyone has their own, so you're not sharing the same contact surface, basically. However, we had anecdotal evidence that they weren't being used correctly if used at all. So we wanted to investigate if there was any sort of risk of transmission of infectious disease through the sharing of these pipes. To investigate this risk, this is just the aims and objectives. To investigate this risk, we basically undertook the microbiological sampling. We then identified any pathogens that we could find within the samples. We also looked at the cleaning techniques and typical hygiene conditions of the bars. We thought it would be one thing to find if there was a risk, but then we also wanted to understand if there are any contributing factors to this risk, or if there is any ways that we can minimise the risk. I also conducted interviews of the bar managers. This was to try and understand why the hygiene factors would be as they were. So we could basically build up a full picture. So in terms of the sampling, we went to 8 shisha bars and sampled 32 pipes. And you can see in red on the right-hand side the high-risk areas that we identified for sampling. Obviously, we wanted to sample disposable tips when they were available, because they were going to be the direct contact point. We also wanted to sample the mouthpieces, because we thought if people aren't using the tips correctly, they're likely to be using the mouthpiece. And traditionally, it would be the mouthpiece that's used. We sampled both the disposable tip and the mouthpiece for bacteria. We also used, in the bottom left there, a little chlamydia test as well, of all things, because that can pick up respiratory viruses. So we used that on the mouthpiece as well to see if there's any viral risk. And then finally, we sampled the water. It was a bit of an odd one. We basically had a running theory that because there's a lot of particulate matter going through the pipe, which is then bubbling through the water, we might find that particulate matter is sort of picking up bacterial pathogens and then becoming aerosolized, which then may be unhealthy for the pipe. It's a bit of a theory, but we wanted to have a look at the water to see what pathogens could be there. And like I say, all of those samples were analysed by public health labs. On top of that, the interviews, we looked at cleaning facilities, storage facilities, preparation areas, how they cleaned, what they cleaned with, those sort of basic things. And then the interviews were looking at the manager's perceptions of health risks from smoking shisha, what they thought might contribute to sort of contamination of the pipes, if they thought there was any way of improving them, and basically if we were to put together guidance, would they actually find it useful, would they take it on board? So the results of the sampling, this is just a very crude graph that shows average contamination per sample in each premises. So the main things to take from this is that the disposable tips were very highly contaminated. And that's not a surprise because, of course, people are putting them in their mouths. We've got direct contamination with saliva, so we expected to find that quite high. What was more surprising is that mouthpieces were very similarly contaminated. There wasn't a great difference between them. If tips were being used correctly, you wouldn't expect any contamination at all. So that prompted us to really think, well, people aren't using tips, the mouthpieces are also going to be a sort of a risk. And then finally, the bowl water. There's a perception that the water's refreshed after each use and cleaned out. And that's what customers typically expected. But what we found is that 75% of the bowl water samples we took were actually reaching the 10,000 colony forming unit per milliliter detectable level. So they couldn't even count the amount of bacteria that was in this water. It was absolutely teeming. And I'm glad you've all had your lunch, because this is basically what 1 milliliter of shisha water looks like when it's growing on a plate. It is absolutely teeming. And so within that contamination, we also looked at the types of pathogens, the species that you're likely to find. In the tips and the mouthpieces, we found a lot of staph. That's not really surprising, because there's going to be hand contact, mouth contact, and it is a natural skin flora. We also found E. coli on one of the tips. This was an extremely contaminated tip at 30,000 colony forming units, which again was the detectable level for an environmental sample. So we kind of wondered what was going on with that tip. In terms of the mouthpieces, we also found three positive samples for respiratory viruses. Found parainfluenza type 3, influenza B, and adenovirus. And this is the first study that we know of that's actually identified viral contamination of shisha pipes. I'll explain a bit more about that later. And then with the bowl water, I mean, most of the organisms you can see there are associated with water anyway. So they're not too unexpected, but they can be pathogenic in the right circumstances. We're a bit surprised to find candidas in there, some yeast. But we're really surprised to find Lactococcus lactis, because this is a pathogen associated with cheese production and milk. So we didn't really understand why that was there at first, but I'll go into that in a bit more in a minute. So this is a bit more on the respiratory viruses. It's basically showing all of the positive samples that the labs have identified over the past year. What you'll notice as well is that the dates that we found these the viruses actually correlate with when they're basically prevalent or begin to be prevalent in the wider population. The adenovirus one there does drop off, but that's because they stopped sampling because the test wasn't working. So that was actually on the increase. Now there's two possible implications from this. Either there's just lots of viruses out in the population, so we're likely to find it on the pipe just by chance. Or there's also a possible theory that the sharing of shisha pipes actually contributes to the transmission of viral disease within these communities. Viruses pose an additional risk as well, because with bacteria, you've got passing of the pipe between people within the same group. So there's a risk of transmission within the same group. However, with viruses, some of these can last, say, 4 hours on a shisha pipe. They're quite hardy compared to bacteria. The risk of this, of course, is if the pipes aren't properly cleaned after each use, the next group to use a shisha pipe could pick up these respiratory viruses and therefore contribute to greater transmission. In terms of the hygiene inspection, unfortunately, it kind of correlated with this risk with viruses. The facilities were generally pretty poor. At the most extreme, we found one where all the storage, all the cleaning, all the preparation was done outside in an alleyway. It was done in a tiny little sink with a concrete slab being used as a drainage board, a paving slab, that even had the ring of mud around the outside where it had just been lifted off the floor and put on the side of this sink. And that was on top of a backed up gully of sort of water and bits and pieces floating around. It was absolutely filthy. Some of them were good, but generally pretty poor. We also found, more importantly, that the cleaning of the pipes was really inadequate. The best clean part of the pipe is the stem, which is the bit from the head unit down into the water bowl, which no one has any real contact with. That was cleaned very regularly, but then the water bowl was they often claimed to refresh it after every use, but from what we saw, it wasn't happening. Also, it was only being cleaned properly anywhere between once a day to once a week. So there's a chance for everything to build up and grow, which explains why we found such high levels of pathogenic contamination in them. We also found that when they were cleaning those bowls, they were using inadequate cleaning solutions. So they were, I'd say about 50% of the time they were using washing up liquid. The rest of the time it was things like mouthwash, glass cleaner, and most bizarrely, milk. We found that 2 premises, the ones with the highest contamination, were using milk as their cleaning solution. Which explains why we found that Lactobacillus lactis. We also found that the mouthpiece and the hose, the real high risk area, wasn't being cleaned sufficiently at all. The 2 premises, again, that were using milk and had the worst contamination, weren't ever cleaning that item, or that part of the pipe. And those that were would simply put a bit of water in the hose, hold the end, shake it about, and chuck the water out. That was the extent of the cleaning. And then finally, the last thing we found was that they were using juices and fizzy drinks sometimes in the water bowl instead of water for extra flavour. So you could have a double apple, so apple shisha with an apple juice in the bowl, just to make it a bit stronger. Now we think that might be why there's candidas and yeast in there, because they're associated with fruit. So you can see how the cleaning techniques not only not getting rid of some of the pathogens that are on there, but it's also potentially introducing some. And this is basically the first place we went to, and this is actually a very good sort of generalisation of the ones we went to in Birmingham. You can see in the top left there, that's what they call the specialised shisha cleaning unit. I think to you and me, that's a shower. The one on the bottom left there, that's a pipe that's been cleaned with milk. You can see there's a big build-up of sort of, we think it's milk residue around the top of the water line there. And they were very cloudy, and when we opened these, they stunk. It was horrible. It really wasn't nice. You see in the middle as well, there's sort of a yellow tape that holds the water bottle to the pipe. Now this was really hard to take off, and they were reluctant to do it for us, which kind of indicates that, that if they're reluctant to do it for us, what are they going to be doing when it comes to cleaning? Are they going to actually be taking up and cleaning it regularly? In terms of the interviews, basically we found a very poor understanding of hygiene. Their perception of the need for hygiene was weak. They couldn't really understand or explain to me any health risks from shisha. Even with the inhalation of smoke, they still believe the myth that they believe that the water actually filters out harmful chemicals. Now there's mountains of evidence to say that isn't true. But on top of that, in terms of infection control, they couldn't see any way of contaminating the pipes, whether it's staff or customers who were using the pipes. They couldn't explain to me how the tips would prevent transmission, even though they were telling me that that's what they did. Basically, it was just generally very poor. And when they did have hygiene practices in place, like washing hands, using gloves, cleaning the pipes, it was more a practice to prevent mixing flavours so that they could keep apple as apple and not have it mixed with others, as opposed to doing that for hygiene reasons. So this kind of gives you an appreciation of where these bars are coming from. I'm sure Janet would say most of these businesses are making a fast buck, if you like. They've got a very high turnover of profit, and it seems that their focus is more on making sure they have a high quality product than a safe product. To some extent, though, we could say if there's been no research on this before, so they're perhaps not to know that there's a risk of infection control, even if it might be apparent. And then finally, milk. Again, the interviews revealed why they were cleaning with milk. One of them told us that basically, in his home country, where they smoke a lot of shisha, a lot of cigarettes, they'll have a glass of milk in the evening to soothe their throat. Now he's taken that as milk cleans the throat, and so he's translated that to milk being able to clean the shisha pipe. So it's a bit of a, you can almost understand where it's coming from, but when you think about it in reality, milk is not going to clean the pipe. So to conclude, we found heavy microbiological contamination for shisha pipes, including several pathogens. Most importantly, the respiratory viruses. It's the first time any have been shown to be on shisha pipes, and there's also this potential that is linked to prevalence in the wider population. So based on that alone, it appears there's a risk of infectious disease transmission. On top of that, Pipes aren't being suitably cleaned. They're not being stored in a suitable manner, which is only going to sort of add to the problem. There's no real control in place. And this seems to be down to poor understanding of hygiene and the risks from the managers. And then just to finish on that, I'm really not convinced, well, I'm certainly not going to be washing my plates for the milk milk, that's for certain. And I'll pass you on to Gam now for the carbon monoxide side of it.
As part of my research, I investigated the exposure level of carbon dioxide and PM2.5 inside Shisha premises. And in addition, I also looked into the standards of the health and safety, standards of health and safety, and the compliance level and knowledge of legal requirements in accordance with the UK. For this research, I choose carbon monoxide and PM2.5 because of their severity, health risk. If you know the properties of carbon monoxide, they are known as a silent killer in the UK. And they are odorless and chemically very uncertain. And they have a unique ability to bind up to take off the oxygen carrying capacity of the red blood cells in your bloodstreams. So that's one of the severe risks associated with carbon monoxide. And PM2.5, why consider PM2.5 especially? Because we have PM10 as well. But PM10 can deposit on the respiratory tract of the human beings. However, PM2.5 has the ability to penetrate deep into your lungs and arteries and even into your red blood cells, which cause severe lung diseases in the human beings. I've considered, in terms of methodology and equipment, I sampled 12 out of 21 Shisha premises in Birmingham, and for carbon monoxide, we see a very significant sensor with different heads for different pollutants. However, the head with a light in the middle is a couple of carbon monoxide. And for PM2.5, we use RTO meter. Both of the data for both pollutants recorded inside the Shisha premises and outside Shisha commercial air, which is in their findings here, just 20 to 25 meter away from the Shisha premises. And in addition, I've also taken account into the indoor PM2.5 carbon monoxide levels of the restaurants of Birmingham, which includes very famous restaurants like Bamboo's, Jim Spices, and Moon in China. I consider restaurants for indoor quality because I assume that they have cooking facilities into their premises, so they also generate equal level of carbon monoxide and PM2.5 inside their premises. And as part of to find out their general health and safety standards, I produce a health and safety checklist which contains different all these points which was through the different aspects of the requirements. So these are the results. For 1 hour, is a thing to say. Shisha PM2.5 levels, the Shisha premises is 286.5 to 90 grams per meter cube, and for 30 minutes is pretty much similar to 54.56, which is very more than the outdoor background and indoor concentration. If you also notice that you can able to find the indoor concentration levels are even lesser than outdoor background levels. And same goes with the carbon monoxide data as well. They're not very high, but still we got some 1 hour and 2 hour ratings. Also, dynamic statistics results, we found very strong correlation when I did peer tests for the PM2.5 levels for the indoor and outdoor background levels for 30 minutes and 1 hour. I found very strong correlation. If you're able to see in this page, these will show my correlation. These are my correlation graphs. So they are very close to perfect relationship. Showing this strong correlation with this graph also means that the PM2.5 are leaking towards the outer environment, which means that if they have a residential blocks over the premises or the sites, and the PM2.5 can be able to affect the serious health level of the residents as well. And if you go on the second page, in addition to the correlation, after further conducted, the relation between the PM2.5 levels and carbon monoxide levels in the Shisha premises with the number of active Shisha pipes. So if you could be able to see in there, if you could be able to remember in the second slide, the smoking environment in the Shisha premises can be able to easily correlate the PM2.5 are very close to perfect relation, which is equal to 1. And it shows that the active Shisha pipes are especially contributing towards the level of PM2.5 in the Shisha rather than the carbon monoxide. So we could conclude that carbon is coming from the source as well. The carbon keeps which is stored and burned outside and will cause the nearby traffic. Research continues. Based on the EU standards, Protection Agency AQ and Air Quality Index, PM2.5 level, which is to PM2.5 level is considered hazardous for the employees if they are exposed to that level. The limitations for their work shift like for 4 hours, 8 hours, and if there is a consumer inside the consumers inside the Shisha premises which is smoking for a session, they are exposed to a hazardous level of PM2.5. And on the third page of this paper, I've got the risk results in the brief of my health and safety inspection, which shows major contraventions, non-compliance with Shisha premises and their owners and the poor knowledge against the UK legal requirements. As you can see, it's coming into the next slides as well. So they have put awareness second-hand smoke. You see in this slides, only out of 12 that got only one Shisha premises shows out of the risk assessment. And for this research, I considered 5 legislation of UK, which is smoke for the public health, the Health Act, Health and Safety Act, Health and Safety Management Acts, and the fire fire safety order. The reason that I'm bringing fire safety legislation inside this because health and safety management acts require you to have the fire risk assessment if you have fire within the forest. However, fire safety order requires you to have general assessments of the fire. If you conducting, if you are involved in such actions like which cause serious fire to your premises, such as charcoal and the burning, the required practices that can be inside the issue. So as a conclusion, I would like to show my photographic evidences we have taken through the different Shisha premises. On the top left, you will be able to see that there is a cigarette pulse on the Shisha premises. So I found inside 2 Shisha premises lots of cigarette pulse in the Shisha, which will be easily able to demonstrate that they are promoting smoking sessions in the Shisha premises. And these are the generally basic slides for the health and safety checklist that users who are exposed to wires now. They don't have any gas safety electrical certificates, and they don't have any specially procedures to follow this one. If you see on the bottom left, it is a kind of overhead warehouse kind of heaters that mostly commonly used in the Shisha premises, which is we fixed on 8 to 10 feet above the ground. This is just 2 feet from my head. So it's like, and these heaters are capable of throwing like serious heats like 500, something around 500 to 600 degrees Celsius of heat. So we actually, due to our subject, we use actually end up putting some provision notices on such heaters. And if you see in the second picture, the second left picture in the bottom row, they always argue with us that these are the open bits of the Shisha premises and they are legally complied. However, none of them are complied with 50% rule because what we consider states that every sheets, every wall, if you have every walls, every doors, every windows are should be considered into 50% rule. And this is totally not applies to the 50% rule. This is common in all Shisha premises. And in addition to that, some basics that I found this gas portable heaters. I chose to sitting here in this and I noticed this was moved by the local public as well, so there's no restrictions for the employees as well as anyone to be able to move this one. And they haven't got all of this covered in the risk assessment. The one risk assessment I found, it only covers fire, but it was all updated and expired. And however, we found different kinds of assessment risk and hazard assessment such as slips and trips, manual handling, these gas heaters, fires, charcoal, skin burns. So they are all kind of, and poor lighting. These are not all kind of things that should be covered, but they haven't got any at the time. These are my results and conclusions. So as part of my final presentation, I would like to pass to Vijay. Thank you.
As you can imagine, as a manager, when you're confronted with all this information, you've got to do something about it. That's one of the problems with doing kind of research. When you want to find something, if you might find it, and then find a hell of a lot more to do with it, then you've got to actually do something with it. So I'll come to in a minute what we are doing about it. I wanted to just say a little bit about additional benefits of undertaking research that probably we don't necessarily think about as an officer because we're too busy just doing the day job. And this is part of, I guess, a reflection of undertaking this work. I'm hoping that the research that Simon and Gamma have done have helped them to increase their employment prospects for the students in the future, as they've been able to demonstrate transferable skills from what they did with, in the field, be able to talk about the interviews and things like that. Hopefully that's helped them gain the employment they gain now. It's also helped to introduce the students to the environmental health world and the world of research, but also just practice of environmental health. I think when Simon and Gan turned up, even the organisation of going out to a number of Shisha premises that don't want you there, that have to have the police to be there on some occasions, that you have to go out late at night. You can only go out on certain days of the week because the lab will only take the samples on a certain day. And having that organisational skills, I think was quite a shock, especially to us all. And not even putting all the equipment together and what equipment that you needed and things like that. This did help to strengthen the links between public health within the council and environmental health. And in one respect, for me personally, I think it was a bit of a personal thing to actually show public health that what environmental health can do. It wasn't just about we're just the footshot soldiers of public health, that we've actually got brains and we can actually work with them at a much higher level than we probably thought of to start off with. I also think it helped to stimulate and refresh a lot of the EHOs that we have with us, because we do our daily work and sometimes we get very focused on it, to think about the practice that we do, the research that we could undertake, and that sometimes that there is evidence that we need to get out there, but we don't necessarily go for it. A lot particularly around evolving public health issues, and we leave it for someone else to do, even though that we can do it ourselves. I'm hoping that this is providing a mechanism for future collaboration between the university and the Public Health England and Public Health with environmental health within Birmingham. I'm hoping we're going to work with Consumer again this year, looking at something completely different. It has taken some time. I'm not saying it's all singing, dancing and great, because it has taken a lot of resource, but we have got a lot back from it, from actually doing this. It's not actually cost us a lot of money to do this either. I mean, yes, the money that it cost was the sampling. The Simon's research, I think that came to about £1,500 to actually have that sample been done. And actually, at one point, that was the thing that was going to scupper the whole thing, because everyone was sat around a table going, we've got no money to do this. And we were very, very lucky. We were very lucky by, through persuasion, by any means that we could, and got this money so that we could do the sampling. And the evidence has bridged a knowledge gap that otherwise wouldn't have been bridged. We're hoping, especially on Simon's work, that we're going to have it published, and hopefully it's going to be published in the BMJ. It may not be, but it's going to be published somewhere, and we're going to make sure it's going to be published somewhere. And so we can use that evidence, and I'm hoping to use that evidence to actually influence policy on Shisha in the future, because at the moment it is an unbelievable challenge that people don't necessarily want to tackle, and we need that evidence to take it forward. So the next steps, as I say, if you go looking for something, you've got to sometimes do something with what you've got. And it has. I mean, we got a lot more than we thought we were going to get. So what we are looking at, and I'm very grateful for the students that we've got at the moment. We've got 4 students with us, and they are looking at how we take this problem forward. We're thinking about doing some health messages for users and in educational settings. We're we want to work with the businesses, even though they might not want to work with us, and I know they don't, because we go out quite regularly, but trying to help the businesses help themselves to protect their employees and their customers from potential harm that they may be doing. I mean, something that we have that's very, very basic, and it's only the start of it, is even produce like a shisha pipe cleaning instruction that we're going to have laminated and just physically give them out, so hopefully they can follow it and be reminded of what they need to do. It's something very basic, and we're going to try it this week when the officers go out with the police. Hopefully, as I said, it's when we get the research published, it will help to review current legislation. And I've already talked to the CIEH about this, we've talked to the Tobacco Collaboration in Warwick about it, but they need the evidence before we can actually start talking about this. And as I say, we're hopefully going to take this forward to be published in the near future. Thank you very much. That's our contact details if you need any more information. We've also got 2 posters around the corner. Looks like really great. And we took that to the CIEH conference this year. So Public Health England helped us produce the posters, which we were very grateful for. Because I've never done a poster before for a scientific poster. And if you want any more information, ask us questions now or later. Thank you.